Baku, breaths to spark the human heart. Hey there, friends and family, it's Mark Philpott here. Thanks so much for tuning into the third episode of the Baku podcast. So last week, I looked at the resistance, how to beat it, push through it, through those early stages of discomfort that are inevitable in any new venture, from starting out jogging, to writing, to asking out girls. So this week, I've given up. No, not on asking out girls. My wife put an end to that long ago. But on the podcast. That's it. This will be the end of the podcast. It's been a pleasure. I'm Mark Philpott. Baku. No, it's not over that easily. If you're forcing yourself to listen to this dribble, then there's more mind-bending pain in store for you. Get ready to embrace episode 3. If you are here being supportive, then that's really sweet. But here's the secret to podcasting. I know it feels like I'm in your living room, curled up in your Bluetooth speaker or your earbuds, but the secret is I'm not really there. I can't see if you turn this off. I won't know at all. Try it. Switch off the podcast, then send me a text telling me how much you enjoyed this episode. I'll be none the wiser. Unless I get 6 text messages and the podcast stats tell me that only 5 people have been listening to the episode. Then I'll know that one of you is lying, which will probably send me into a neurotic spin, analysing the tone of each text message, searching for the Judas among us. No, but really, I find speaking to a podcast audience is very different compared to a living live audience. Like, for example, when I used to speak in a church. I remember the first Sunday morning sermon that I ever gave. As a young buck in the ministry team, normally I was only allowed to speak at the evening service, which was a much smaller crowd. Less minds to mislead, I guess. But this Sunday, someone must have been on holidays or something, and I landed the morning gig, the big AM stage. There were usually 300 odd people there of a Sunday morning, and I was sweating bullets. Now, on the whole, people are kind and encouraging, even in a church on a Sunday morning. And people really want you to do well. So they try to look up from the pews encouragingly. People nodding, smiling, maybe pretending to take notes. Well, people weren't really taking notes while I was speaking. And if they did, when you open up those notebooks, every page for years of Sundays would have the same answer. Jesus, Jesus, no, Jesus again. I shouldn't poke too much fun. There are some great people that I met along the way in churches. Very kind and encouraging people who help nurture who I am. So on the whole, people are very kind when you're speaking in public. You know, most people are well trained to be polite and considerate. But in a crowd of 300, when you're up the front speaking, you inevitably notice the one person who isn't being attentive. I remember one guy that used to sit dead centre, often in one of the pews near the front, and each week without fail, no matter who was speaking, he'd fall asleep about 5 minutes into the sermon. The sleeping guy. And the whole time I'd be up there thinking, I spent 20 hours writing this, trying to read Greek, wading through books and exegetical texts, and this guy's fallen asleep. But when it comes to podcasts, I guess you almost expect some of your audience will be falling asleep. And if that's how this podcast is helpful to you, then that's great. I'm pleased to be of service. And your snoring won't even distract me while I'm speaking. Podcasts are new, and new is often a little bit weird. So after working through the resistance last week, preparation this week was better. I've been using the little SPARK acronym, sitting with the feelings, shifting perspective, a little activity outside kicking the stuffing out of the boxing bag, before reflecting on the experiences that I feel grateful for, and then kicking off. This week, each morning, I've just been dumping some thoughts on the page for 15 minutes or so, until I finally came across a theme and the words just started to flow. And thanks for asking. I'm feeling pretty good this week. A little lighter, a bit more at ease, a bit like that first wind has passed. And you know the feeling. The morning after a big Mexican meal, And when you do finally let go, on the other side of that resistance is all that good stuff. Flow, creativity, artistic freedom, the artist's paradise, where the muse sits gently on your shoulder, whispering, and the artist becomes the empty vessel, just channeling the sweet, pure truths of the universe onto the page. A state of creative bliss, completely in sync with the authentic self and the spirit of all things. What a beautiful emotional state. I wonder what it feels like to reach that state. Because instead of creative nirvana, I find myself here in this present state of weirdness, which is the topic for this episode, and we finally got there. Feeling weird is something we're all getting a bit used to at the moment, with all these stay-at-home restrictions. It feels like we're all on a weird kind of part-time house arrest without the ankle bracelets. Though I have heard in areas under stage 4 restrictions, police are checking the GPS on people's phones to see how long they've been out of their homes. It's pretty surreal. Here in regional Vic though, we're only on stage 3 restrictions. Yes, we can still go for a surf or take a leisurely stroll for 1 hour and say 10 minutes a day if we please. We can even shop for groceries or go out to exercise at night. I've never had the slightest inclination to go for a jog at night until my friends in Melbourne weren't allowed to. Must be some sort of mass repressed sibling rivalry going on. The authority figure makes an activity illegal for some and it becomes so much more attractive for everyone else. It's almost worth doing just so you can make your mates jealous in your weekly Zoom or WhatsApp call. What did you get up to this week? Oh, not much, but I did go for a run at night. Yeah, went out about 8 p.m, got home at 9:05. Ha, the privileges of regional Victorian living. It's interesting, isn't it, how shaking up the routine and causing massive disruption in our lives can shine a light on what is truly weird. Personally, I've always known I'm a bit of a weirdo. Sure, I try to hide it sometimes. Maybe some friends and family would dispute that point. But I'm comfortable with my weirdness. And to be honest, this is because I suspect everybody else is a bit weird too. The secret to embracing weirdness, and I'm not sure I should really be sharing this with you, but the secret is when we become aware of our weirdness, we can choose how we'd prefer to be weird. That's right, you can be weird in a normal kind of way, like the rest of the herd contentedly chewing grass in the meadow, or you can be weird in a way that's truly authentic and unique to you. In the midst of this pandemic, I've observed both sides of the weird coin playing out. People's behaviour has become very strange, which has been both a blessing and in some cases quite detrimental. There are the weirdo protesters in the media this week, plotting on social media to head out into the streets protesting against social distancing and stay-at-home restrictions. And I suppose everyone is entitled to their own opinion. But when their lungs are turning to concrete, we'll see how that opinion works out for them, right? I can see the protester turning up at the emergency department. Well, hello there, sir. Yes, it does sound like COVID-19, but no, sorry, we won't be offering you any medical assistance today. I saw your face on the protest on TV. These ventilators are reserved for people who are following the health advice. A little too harsh? I don't know. Natural selection? Well, maybe. Then there are the weirdo toilet paper hoarders. I've concluded there must be hundreds of people who are still unable to cross their living rooms due to the stockpile of toilet paper they accumulated in the panic buying frenzy before the first restrictions were imposed. Apparently some of these families haven't been able to watch TV in months because the TV remote is stuck on the other side of the Great Wall of toilet paper. I've reached this conclusion as it's the only logical explanation I could think of to explain why so many people are continuing to breach the isolation and stay-at-home restrictions. Maybe the government needs to initiate a toilet paper buyback scheme so these fools can clear their living rooms, turn on their TVs, and pay attention to the restrictions that are in place to save people's lives. As I sat pondering the weirdness further, I also found myself questioning the absurdity of many things that society has accepted as normal. Like the way we entrust nurture and care of our most precious family members to complete strangers. Our beloved family in the care of people we barely know so that we can spend all day at work. That's right. Doggy daycare exists, and for some ludicrous reason, people pay to have somebody watch their dogs while they're at work all day, which raises the question, why have the dog in the first place? Incidentally, I also heard these establishments were swiftly shut down when work from home orders were issued. Apparently dogs are suspected as being some kind of super spreader. But schools, on the other hand, primary and secondary school settings, which are by definition hundreds of snotty-nosed people with no impulse control jammed into confined spaces for 6 hours a day, not to mention the thousands of students. These institutions, while the instruction was issued to all Victorians, if you can work or study from home, you must. Lives are depending on it. Schools remained open for a couple of weeks, like some sort of giant science experiment. The plague continued to ravage our community. We're told not to leave our houses, but at the same time the government declares that schools remain safe places. I must have missed the little disclaimer after the announcement, which probably said something like, "This safety announcement excludes dangers including but not limited to rabid dogs, acts of violence and infectious disease, authorised by your loving government Canberra." You have to listen very carefully. So in this pandemic and beyond, let's all embrace our weirdness in a mindful manner. Make choices that prioritise the health and well-being of our families and our communities. Because in the words of Dr. Zeus, we are all a little weird, and life's a little weird. And when we find someone whose weirdness is compatible with ours, we join up with them, fall in mutual weirdness, and call it love. I wish you all the best this week, and I look forward to chatting again soon. Bye.